Hey guys, Henning and Morten here from FlippedNormals. In this video, we are going to be showing you a quick excerpt from a premium tutorial, Concepting with Marvelous Designer and ZBrush. The full series covers how to make really cool clothing, first blocking it out in Marvelous Designer, and then just taking it into ZBrush afterwards to really spice it up. In this chapter, you're going to be able to see us blocking in the main clothing, like the pants and the basis of the jacket. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
So let's start the process of making our avatar not naked anymore. And we're just going to start off with some simple pants like the ones we found on Google. And you know, the patterns are pretty simple for these pants because it's just going to be something that actually just covers her. I want it to be some quite tight fitting pants. First thing you want to do is just go to the polygon tool with the H key and just draw out something super simple. So it's just going to be this kind of pattern. And right now everything is kind of wonky and off. So what you can do is there's a cool feature in Marvelous that lets you align 2 points to each other. So if you just drag out your marquee tool, make sure you select 2 points, and then right click one of the points and you can say align to x-axis and y-axis. You want to align this to the x, and this one we want to align to the y. So something simple like that. And then this part here is actually going to be our crotch section, or the in between the legs kind of. So let's just, with the C tool, the edit curvature tool selected, you just drag something out for the inside of the crotch or between the legs. And I'd always recommend to have some reference on hand, either like I keep it on a separate monitor, or you could, have it in Marvelous like we talked about in the previous chapter. So just drag this in, and if you remember, if you hold down Shift after you started dragging, you have these snapping angles, which can be quite useful. So like I said, I want these pants to be relatively tight. So let's just see here, move that in. Okay. And then actually we're only going to be doing one part of the trousers or the pants, and then we're just going to mirror it over. So let's say this is a good starting point. So we select our pattern, Control C for copy, or you can right click and just go copy. Then it copies it out automatically. But what we want to do first, after we copied it, we want to go in and we want to say mirror paste. And it's going to flip the pattern over in your 2D view, something like that. There we go. That's beautiful. Now, something cool we can do is we can take each of these patterns and then we can flip those again. And because we only really want to be working on as little or as few pieces as possible. So we can take these and we can actually copy these as well. And then we can say symmetric paste. So now we're pasting these over, and now you can see we get these blue backgrounds. That means that they're connected now. So any change I make to this one, you can see it's connected to this one over here. So it's a quite useful feature that really lets you sort of speed up your workflow. So let's just get into positioning these in your 3D viewport. Like hold down Shift and you can select multiple pieces of fabric. If your gizmo doesn't show up after you've clicked, you just click anywhere on your fabric and it's gonna appear. So I'll move it into place. And then once you're back here, you can see it's right now our fabric is facing the wrong way. So with Control G, or if you right click on your pattern, you can go to flip horizontally, and that's just gonna align them sort of in the right direction. At this point, it's not really necessary. Like this is just to get an initial sort of sim position. Okay, and now we need to figure out how are we actually going to sew these together. So obviously we want the edge from this trouser part to be sewn onto that and the side to that. So let's just go ahead and do that. A really handy feature in Marvelous is if you select anything in your 3D viewport, it's going to show up. You see the tiny point. That's where you're selecting in your 3D viewport. So it can sort of assist you in like, oh, which piece do I need to sew it to? So I can say, I want to sew from the top of this pattern to the top of this pattern. And we can see that's that one. Sometimes my brain doesn't work when I do this. So it's a nice feature for me to have. So I can always see like which parts do I actually sew together. And the sewing tool is just the regular segment sewing tool that you get up with the N key. Go, and then we can select that pattern, see what does that line up to that. That's that one. Cool. So from top to top and from top to top. Nice. Now, a tiny issue here. You can see that we're actually, these are our sewing lines, and the sewing lines are going through the mesh, which are, like, when we sew this together, it's going to act a little weird. So I like to just move these into position just a little bit so it doesn't penetrate the mesh as much. It's just going to help us out when we simulate. So that's nice. So let's just go ahead and sim it. That is beautiful. Okay, so now we've got two separate pieces of fabric for the trousers. There we go, and there you see they're penetrating a little. This is what I was talking about before. But we will fix that in a second. So you remember we tacked on to the model before with the W key, where we just suspend something in midair. There's another tool if you want to tack something directly onto the avatar, which is these tacking tools. You just click the tack on avatar. You can click a part of your mesh and then click a part of your avatar, and you can see it has this line where it's going to sew up to. Like, I don't like to use the tacking tools. They're a little slow, I think, sometimes. So for the most part, I'll go ahead and I'll use the W tagging. I don't know, it's more practical for me. The other tagging tools might work better for you. It's totally, I think it's very individual. So, and one of the things you're going to learn once you start working in Marvelous is there's going to be a lot of just dragging the mesh and sort of getting it to fit correctly. So, to deal with this problem, I think the best way I found to, like, what you can do is you can just brute force it and like try to drag it through the model, but that could become a little tedious. So what I like to do is I like to unsew parts of it and then re-sew it back together. So let me just quickly demonstrate that. So if you select that pattern and that pattern, those two patterns together, press B in your 2D viewport and you get the edit sewing tool up. You can select your segments and then just delete them with the delete key. So if we sim again, you can see this starts to fall apart here, which is great because now we can because it's tacked on there, we can sort of drag it in a little bit. Maybe we use W to drag these into place. And now what I like to do here is, instead of let's try to sew all this together again, you saw what happened down at the legs. We can go in and use our segment sewing tool, the free sewing tool, which is the M key. And if we sew it from the top and just do like maybe to here, then click, do the same length over on the other side, it's only going to sew those parts together and leave the rest of the pattern open. And just to remember to delete these tags here, you just hold down W and you click them, and that gets rid of that for you. Maybe we don't want, that's fine. So now, because these can just be dragged onto the other side, there you go. And then what you can do is you can either just continue your sewing or go in with the edit sewing tool again, delete the sewing, like when you're not simming anything anyway, then complete it with a segment sewing tool this time, and then that's going to sew on really, really nicely onto there. So let's just quickly go ahead and do that on the other side as well. I think honestly the sort of W tacking tools are one of my favorite features inside of Marvelous, because it's such an easy way to just position things. It's quick, it's intuitive, and I mean that's the way I prefer to work. If you want to work with the other tack tools, that's totally fine. It's up to you. It's just whatever you prefer. I think this is what works the best for me. Okay. Let's get that in there. Go. And now we're just going to use the same technique as we did on the other side, where we're going to start out with the sort of free segment sewing. It was not the free segment, it's just the free sewing tool, I suppose. Ooh, that might be a little tight. Okay, there we go. Marvelous is fine. It figures it out. So, there we go. Now these pants might be a little too tight. Well, maybe they're fine. I guess we'll figure out Go there. Edit sewing tool as the B key. Delete the free sewing again. N key for the segment sewing. There we go. Let's go in. Delete these with the W key. Resew it back together and boom. There we go. Now our pants are almost done. Sweet. Now all we need to do is sort of sew these segments together. But before we do that, I think it looks like we might need a little more space in here in order to like sew them together effectively, because I think it might be a little too tight. So we just pull these out here. There we go. It's just gonna create a little bit more space. We can also create just a bit of an angle to it, that's just sort of to fit it better to her body. So there we go. Now it's a little more loose and it's probably going to be a little easier to sew the pants together now. So we're just going to go in with the segment sewing tool and sew these together. And because we've got symmetric sewing on, it does it both in the front and in the back. Excellent. Nice. Okay, so that's our very basic pants. Let's just pull them up a little bit. And you can see it's struggling a little bit with the dragging. That's because they're very tight to the body. A way to visualize this is if you come up here to your mesh options, there's this one right here, which is the heat map. And you can see how much stretching there is. So up here around the waist, it's 120% stretching. That's the maximum it goes to. And I want to achieve that on the lower part of the legs as well, because I want it to be a tight fit down here. So let's just work on that. One thing we might also do is you can go into this opacity mode to see where the fit is. And you see they're quite loose down here. And typically on women, pants like these would probably have a better fit. So we can shift select these two and just move them up at the same amount. Maybe like that. And then what we can do is in the front here, I want to just make this curve a little less curvy, I suppose. There we go. And then we'll try to resew. There we go. And now you can see it fits, it's a little more snug, the fit there. That's probably better. It's a little tight around the back, but that's going to be fine. It's going to be fine for this. So, I mean, I really just recommend that you experiment with this until you find sort of, maybe that's a good shape for it, or that's definitely not a good shape for it. Just to see what fits your character, your model the best. And we're also going to want a little more length on these, definitely. Because right now, I mean, they kind of look like they've been dragged down a little bit. But first, let's pull these in. Just tighten it up. Might want to make them a little shorter as well. Like, it's not hugely important for this model, because we're not going to be seeing the bottom part of her. There we go. And then you can go in and let's see. Maybe want to extend these up just a little. Oh. That's again shift clicking on the edges of the points and you can drag things up. Okay. So maybe that's a good compromise there. Now, in order just to have just a little bit of a sort of, let's call it elastic fit around, what you can do is you can create a sort of like a belt around, and that's one of the instances where I would use the rectangle tool. I just drag out something there. There we go. And if we do some quick math, because we want to sew this to this, and we see these are around 200 each, so that's 800 millimeters. Minus 1,000 right now. I mean, it's a little less than 800. So we can go lower, so it's going to tighten it up a little bit as well. There we go. See there. And now this is kind of like in Marvelous Designer. There's for the standard avatars, there are these points that you can wrap your mesh to. But I don't really want to have to set it up every time I do my avatar. So the quickest way for me, because right now this is not bending, so simming this around, like right now it just fall down. Obviously we don't want that. So I just W tack or tick it onto the mesh or in air, and then I just there you go. No, there you go. Okay, so just do that, and then I can just move it around, drag it onto it fits, whoops, sort of around the model. It's not, I mean, yeah, I guess this is a little ghetto to do it this way, but it works for me, to be honest. So it's good enough for me at least. And then segment sew this top edge to that top edge. There we go. And then we want these two seam lines to be here, these two to line up roughly. And then we're going to sew this onto that. You see, this does get a little tight now, but once we start to fit this onto the pants, it's not going to be a problem. Sometimes you run into these sort of self-intersection problems, you just have to sort it out. Okay, so in order to sew this onto here, we're going to use a new tool in MD 5.5, which is the M&M free sewing tool. If you come up to the free sewing tool, this is also in the segment sewing tool actually, so we could use that, but we're just going to use the free one for now. And go here, and then because we don't want to have to calculate, we can do this where we free sew this to this, and it'll sort of mark out, okay, we get to there. Instead of doing that, we want to sew them all together at the same time. And this tool is really handy for that actually. So with the free M&M sewing tool selected, we just, oh, it's not selected, now it's selected. We just want to start, so this is going to be, we want to sew the seam lines from here, right? So we want this to be the starting point. That's our starting point right there. So let's just start the sewing from there. Drag this out, and then we'll snap on to the next one. It has to be in sequence in order for this to work. So we go like that. And if you've got these 4 segments selected, you press enter, and that'll sort of tell Marvelous, okay, now which ones do you want to sew it onto? So I want to sew it onto the length of this. You can see Marvelous is like, oh, your point should be up here, but it's not. So this means that it's 47 millimeters too short, which is just fine for us. So we click it, press enter again, and it'll automatically make these sewing lines. So we sim it, and it snaps perfectly onto there. Great. We could maybe drag it down a little bit. There we go. Now that's super sexy yoga pants. Great. And again, maybe the fit is a little off. Like we made it longer again, but then maybe we want to go in just one more time and just drag this up. Edit the curve. There we go. Okay. Like usually on pants, the backside curve would probably be wider because there's a bigger space from the butt to the center of the legs than there is from the front. But this looks just fine. There we go. Cool. So these are fairly tight pants. If you go into the heat map thing, you can see it stretches a little bit, but it's actually fine, I think. Now a quick thing I want to note is that you can see on all of my patterns I have the edge lengths turned on, and that was just Shift and Z to turn that on and off. You can also right click and just go in and say show line length. I like to have this turned on so I can always see the length of this. It can be a little annoying sometimes if you've got complex patterns, but for the most part I leave this on. So let's move on to the shirt that she's going to be wearing, or I suppose it's more like a top really. We can just move that into place, and we can move these further down so we can actually see what we're doing. And so the top we're also going to make in sort of like a clever way, you could say. Let's go up to the polygon tool again, and we'll just start to draw out sort of the basic shape. Well, we know we're going to have some straps for this, and that's going to be, these two represent our straps. Just going to split this down the middle because we're only doing one half, and then we're flipping this over, and I'll show you how that works. This goes up to here, and to here. Like I'm just freestyling this right now, so this is just the top. So again, with the edit curvature tool, you can go in and just make the curve for the arms. With your edit pattern tool, you can go and sort of adjust all the edge lengths. So a really cool feature is that, let's say, oh darn, I forgot to add some pointers. I mean, you don't have to redo anything or remake it. You can just go in with your X tool to add split point, and you can just say, I want a point there and I want a point there, which is really practical. Or you go and right click the line and say split, and you can split it into specific lengths, or say you want a segment of 4. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 segments right there. It's just a really handy and quick tool to sort of get it out really quickly. So just drag this down. So for a top like this, we probably want something pretty, like it's a boxy shape that goes down to the chest, I think. There. Just reshape it a little better for the shoulders, and that's maybe let's do that. So I think, yeah, this is probably going to be, it's going to fit. It's a little tight, but let's make it a little wider. There we go. So that's the one. That's the front. It's the one part of the front side. So you can go in and just right click on the middle line and say unfold. Now the unfold is just going to move it over and merge it at the same time. And I don't want that split line in there because it just messes up with the pattern. And this split line was just there in the beginning to sort of represent, okay, this is where the middle is going to be. So we can move this down just to have it be a little nicer. And then you can actually go in and right click it and say convert to point if you don't want it in there. If you now press V, you can see these are the curve points that it's automatically added. So these are perfect for me. Like, this is a great shape, but you know, you might want to go in and adjust yours if you don't like the look of it. And actually, maybe just move this out a little bit. There we go. Yeah, that's a great thing. Okay, and now we just want to copy this and want to paste it. So Control C, Control V, like any other application really. The rest of the top, move it back, and then we're just going to use the Control and G key to flip it. So right click and say flip horizontal. This is just a little faster. Okay, now the top is a little easier to line because there's nothing that's being sewn in between legs and tight spaces. And because we've got these two top points, we can actually sew this directly onto there and it's just going to stick. Now, my brain struggles sometimes because I'm like, oh, where does this point sew to? So this is, again, where the marker tool is really handy. So I can see I sew these two inside edges, and I'll just use the segment sewing tool, the N key, and then sew those two together. And brain's a little farty again, so you can do that, sew that to there. There we go. And then space key, sim that. Boom. There we go. And that is a great start for a top, and now she's almost decently dressed now. Took a while, so you see the top is probably just a little short, but we'll fix it. So these two together, and boom. Sim it again, nice top. Okay, so this is where we want our pattern to just be a little tighter. So just like with the pants, you can go in. I mean, it's nice to like, this is really, I do this a lot in Marvelous. It's just dragging stuff around, making it fit a little better, see how can we sort of optimize the top, if you will. Okay, let's just go in and just gonna drag this down a little bit. There we go. Push it in some. There we go, a little bit tighter. And this is really nice now because this is gonna create the base for our folds on top once we start making the sort of the jacket for her. So we've already got folds present in the mesh, which is actually, it's really nice, I think. So yeah, I think that's pretty good. And that is how you make a top and So pants. Now, just because we haven't actually covered this, how to save things. So if you go to File, and I usually save as a project, because projects are nice because they just contain everything that you have in your scene. Otherwise, you can save your garments, and then you have to load in your avatar separately. Like, there are merits to them. Like, you can have separate garments and merge them together afterwards. Like, that's really nice. Generally, I just save as projects because I just like to work in that fashion. And there we go. That is all you need to know about a simple pair of pants saving and a top.